Hello, this is Demon Phoenix with part 4 of my Deathmarch walkthrough for Witcher 3. This time we'll be focusing on the next set of upgrades and how we go about progressing Geralt as a character and building up some of the stronger aspects of the game. We've got the difficult part out of the way. What I would recommend is that if you've not gone to Skellige already, now is the time to do so. The enemies on the boat to Skellige will be about level 14 and we're already level 11, level 12 at this part of the walkthrough. After you destroy this nest, you've got a few sirens to take out first, and Ekhidna will come out. Now it is a red skull enemy, which you would think would be extremely difficult, but sirens and Echidnas are just not that hard an enemy. So as you may have seen in my video about going to Skellige earlier, you can actually beat this thing at level 4 or 5 if you have the patience for it. So when the level difference is only about 6 or 7, because it's level 19 enemy, it's really not that difficult. So just keep knocking it down, keep wailing on the siren, and keep going up, and because we've got Griffin armour and Griffin school techniques, shouldn't be a problem at all. Now you do want to make a manual save before you do this. Part of the reason that you beat this Ekhidna in the first place, the main reason really, is just to get the Echidna mutagen from it, so you can make the Echidna decoction. And so as you see, we've taken it down there with the poison and bleeding, and that's why you need to make a manual save first, because you need to check that you do get the Echidna mutagen like I've done there. Now the Echidna mutagen makes everything a lot easier on Deathmarch, and this is just one of the really good things about it. Every time you use stamina, it regenerates some of your health. Now the thing that's really useful for that is that whenever you use signs in battle. Later on it's whenever you use rend as well. If we get the rend ability, which we'll be doing later. It also means that when you're running around outside of battle, you don't have to depend on food or on swallow anymore, because you can just jump, and that uses stamina and will restore some of your health. And also any signs you're using, so when you're running about you can just either jump whilst you're running, or you can use Quen or Ard or whatever else. You can see my health is going down there because of the potion toxicity, but when I cast the sign it goes back up. So that's an incredibly useful mutagen, and it becomes a staple of everything that we do from now on. So after you've got the Echidna mutagen and you've made the decoction, the other thing to do in Skellige before we go back to Velen and complete more of the Novigrad quests is to pick up the places of power. There are 2 places of power that are dependent on quests, and so we'll not be able to get those until one of them a little bit later in Skellige and one of them much later in the story. So the places of power, you've got the one here where you can go to the marker there at Redgill, just ride up to it. There's a high level Cyclops guarding it, but you can run past him to the left and you don't have to fight him. There's this one here which is unguarded near the Druid camp. There's this one on the beach which is where you've just fought the Echidna. That'll actually be the first one you get. There's this one up in Svorlag, and you just climb up to the left of the haunted house, which is part of the possession quest. So if you go here, there's a house and you can climb up to the left of it. There's some rocks and you climb up and get the place of power. There's this one which is on a path across the top of the mountains. You can get to it from either end of the path. I go from this side, so you go to the notice board and then come up the path there. And then this is the last place of power, and that one's completely unguarded, so you just go to that spot on the map. You can fast travel to these places quite easily. The one that I was stood by is actually at the start there, is the one at the top of Ingvar's Fang, and that is where the location for the bear gear is as well. At level 12, when you level up, you'll get an extra ability slot. Now we've taken care of the main 3 alchemy things that we want here. You could go tissue transmutation to have some extra vitality, but what I'm going to start doing is building up the combat skills. So we get strength training, and you don't want to put it in that slot that you've just opened straight away because you don't have a mutagen slot there. So you just put it with the red mutagen to boost the power, and then you rearrange your green mutagens there. Now we've still got Griffin school techniques because we're using the Griffin armour at the minute, and if delusion is your only blue skill, then that's the one that we're using to boost the sign intensity for the greater blue mutagen. Now the next thing we'll be planning is to get either precise or crushing blows, which increase the critical hit damage for your attacks. You could also go with resolve if you wanted to keep your adrenaline up, or fleet-footed if you're using a light build, but we're going to be focusing on precise blows and then crushing blows. And each of those will increase your critical hit damage for that type of attack, and will also mean that you have more adrenaline gain because the points are in combat skills. Now make sure that you get the red mutagen if you can by combining 3 lesser reds. Back to Velen, there's a couple of contracts that you need to watch out for as being slightly more difficult than usual, and these are the Swamp Thing contract and the Jenny of the Woods contract. The Swamp Thing contract is fighting a Foglet, and because Foglets can do quite a lot of damage, you have to be a bit careful with this one. You can knock him down like any Foglet, but normal Foglets you can kill them straight away with the instant attack, but it's very difficult to do this with the Ignis Foglet, who is the boss here. In fact, I'm not even sure if you can do it. I've not been able to so far. So make sure you're using protective coating on the necrophage oil. You can see that he does a ton of damage, even though we are the same level as him here. So you do have to be careful. If you check the bestiary, like I say, it'll tell you it's necrophage oil that you need, and that's what we're going to keep on the sword. Enhanced necrophage oil should be one of the ones that you have by now, and making sure that we use the moon dust bomb to stop him from being able to fade in and out of the fog makes this fight a lot easier. So you see there, missed him with the first moon dust. You'll be able to tell when you hit him because he gets hit by the shimmers and it stops him from being able to move. So just keep going up. If he gets in a few good hits, then you've got the Echidna decoction. You can see how it works, and this is the general outline for most of the fights from now on with this sort of combat alchemy hybrid that we've got, and later we'll be moving into more of a tank based build. Using the same skills, but you use Swallow and Superior Tawny Owl and Thunderbolt. If you don't have the Superior Tawny Owl yet, then you can obviously just have the enhanced versions. So you're pretty much using those two potions and the Echidna decoction. Even if you've not got the Water Hag decoction, as we discussed in the last video, you can just use the one decoction, and then those are your staple potions to increase your stamina regeneration and your damage for every fight. You should have plenty of alcohol to be meditating whenever you want to get those back. The Jenny of the Woods contract, even though it's a level 10 contract, you can struggle with this one sometimes. She's a very difficult spectre to fight. So you have to make sure that you're using Spectre Oil, and you want your Griffin gear set for this one because it has higher elemental resistance, and then keep up the Spectre Oil at all costs during this fight. So make sure that you keep replenishing it after hits. When it's about to run out, because you do want to have protective coating active. So here I'm using the Water Hag decoction and the Echidna decoction. For this fight you may just want to go with the Echidna, and for most fights in fact you may just want to go with the Echidna decoction and then those main potions as mentioned. Because we've got high toxicity threshold from acquired tolerance, if you're using the Echidna decoction you can still use plenty of potions on top of it, and like I say, you always start with enhanced Thunderbolt and Tawny Owl, because the stamina regeneration is very useful, and so is the extra damage, and then you can use whatever else you want. So the fights will normally have things like Golden Oriole if it's an enemy that's going to poison you and things like that. You can use the Moon Dust on Jenny of the Woods as well. I'm just using the Earthen Trap here, and then keeping up Griffin school techniques, keeping up Quen using Griffin school techniques, but like I say, you can use Moon Dust as well. And you can see in this fight, in difficult fights on Deathmatch, even if you're playing very well, you can lose health, and that's part of the reason the Water Hag decoction is good, but not essential, because you won't spend too much of the fight at full damage sometimes. There are a couple of things you need to watch out for. Next I would carry on with the Dijkstra and Dandelion and Triss storylines in Novigrad, because those are the ones that are about the same level. For this part, in the bathhouse, you don't have your gear, and so you don't have protective coating active because you don't have your sword either. So make sure that you're making good use of signs and have those two decoctions up as well. During the matter of life and death, you get ambushed, and it's a fist fight against 3 people. Now this is a good general tip for deathmatch. Whilst you normally can't use things like potions or signs in regular hand-to-hand fights, like the side quests fighting tournaments, you can in a fight where it's unfair. So when there's 3 fighting you and it's a matter of life and death, you can use those. So just be aware of that and use signs for those fights. When you get to level 15, you unlock another item slot, ability slot rather, and again, because we've got the staple alchemy one sorted, we're still using the Nilfgaardian armour set for human enemies, or the Griffin set just in general, and for monsters. You want to be building up the combat skills again. So again, you could go with tissue transmutation, but I leave that one and synergy until much later when I've got 10 points to be able to put into them, so they're going to be much higher level skills. And as I said before, we're going to use the points that we get here to put 5 points into precise blows. Now as you can see, you don't want to put it in that bottom slot, because when as I demonstrated there, it won't boost the red mutagen. So you want to actually make sure that the 3 red skills are together with the red mutagen at the top, and boosting the damage that you get by then from them, because there's no point in having the red skills on the lower portion of the ability tree, because we don't have the mutagen slot unlocked there yet. When you're doing the Horse and Junior missions, and indeed any of the missions where you have to fight a lot of enemies, you may want to consider switching back to the Nilfgaardian armour from the Griffin one if you're fighting a lot of human enemies, because the Nilfgaardian armour has the better slashing, piercing and bludgeoning damage resistances. This fight should be no problem for you really, but if you were struggling for any reason, just remember that you can bunch up enemies, and that humans and enemies that you typically fight in groups, like drowners, can be quite susceptible to the bombs. So here I'm using an enhanced Devil's Puffball to set up a poison cloud and do a lot of damage there, and then I switch straight away to the enhanced Dancing Star and set a bunch of them on fire, and they're very susceptible to damage over time, even though that they take a few more sword hits and things. So you can see that that's a useful strategy for taking them out. Any enemies that you fight on one-on-one, you can always use Axii to stun them and get some good clean hits, and with the Divana runestone that we've got in the sword, I'm actually using a Tyr Toka blade, which is a relic sword that I found and has very high bleeding, and the bleeding damage adds up there as well. So that's something that you can bear in mind when using the regular builds. Once you've done the missions for the levels that are appropriate at Novigrad, like the Triss and Dandelion missions, you can start on the Skellige missions. Try and keep the missions that you're doing for the main quest line within five levels of your current level. So you never want to get 6 levels ahead of a quest, because you lose a lot of experience there. So you see I'm level 15, and when you start the quests you get into the Trolled Castle and you can buy the Undvik armour. Now the Undvik armour is the first properly decent heavy set that you can get. It isn't essential that you get this. You could go without it. It's a very expensive set of armour. The 4 pieces together cost 3,200 plus crowns, so it's a big chunk of change early in the game. It is a very useful set, but if you're not particularly flush with money, don't feel you have to buy it. You can upgrade the Griffin set at level 18, and that's going to be covered in the next part of the video. So after progressing the quest here, we've got another level quite quickly. The main quest will give you a lot of experience, so that's a good way of getting the experience up. And at level 16 you can equip the Undvik armour. Now the Undvik armour is like, it's a heavy set of armour, and it has even more extreme resistances. It's one of the best sets in the entire game for the human type of damage resistances. It has 60% slashing, which when you combine it with the 25% from protective coating, means that human enemies do very, very little damage. And it also has a bit of monster resistance, and it can be very useful there. So at level 16 you get an extra mutagen slot, and you can also, if you're using the Undvik armour, consider getting Bear School techniques. Unlike Griffin School and Cat School techniques, which are amazing abilities, the Bear School techniques one is decent but not amazing. It adds 20% to your strong attack damage, and it adds extra vitality as well, which is useful but not as essential as the others. So you could move straight onto Crushing Blows if you want, and that would allow you to rearrange the skills and boost the red mutagen there. But the Undvik armour is particularly useful, so if you can for fighting human enemies, so if you can afford it, it's good, because even when you get the bear gear, you can use a couple of the pieces of the Undvik set as well. In fact, it's so strong that you can see here I actually aggravate the guards in Trolled right after this little bit, and it demonstrates just how little damage you can take from those enemies with the Undvik armour and protective coating. But again, not essential, something to consider, and the next part of the video will be following up from level 17 to 28 and how we transition into a heavy attack and Ursine build, which will be the build that we eventually carry through to the rest of the game. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time for the next installment of the walkthrough. Thank you very much.